It's the Wednesday before Memorial Day weekend, and Freddie Farah, owner of the Grand Park Food Market, is busy ringing up his regular customers.
A young man entered the store. That young man asked for a price check, and as Mr. Farah was giving that response, the young man pulled out a firearm.
The suspect pointed it at Mr. Farah. Mr. Farah stepped to his right, kind of in front of the register. The suspect made a couple statements, like, give it up, or give me the money.
Mr. Farah instinctively reached up to move the firearm out of his face, and as he did, the young man shot one time and hit Mr. Farah.
One bullet struck Mr. Farah in the head, just above the right eye.
The man bolts out of Grand Park Food Market, empty-handed. 34-year-old Freddie Farah clings to life as an ambulance rushes him to nearby Methodist Hospital.
I fell to the ground, and they told me that he had been shot in the head. His heart was still beating, but they think he was brain dead. We stayed there until they finally pronounced him dead. He bought 2 grocery stores of his own. The very first one was a very small grocery store. And the second one was when his cousin died, who had a much larger grocery store. His uncle told him, "Why don't you come take over this grocery store?"
In 1972, Freddie buys the Grand Park Food Market.
Shortly after he bought that store, he told me, "I don't think I'm going to stay in this store very long." And I was wondering why he said that. There were long hours. Maybe he wanted to spend more time with the children. He was a very family-oriented man, but he never answered me why he didn't want to stay in that store for very long.
Jacksonville police arrive on scene at the Grand Park Food Market.
When the detectives entered the store, they noticed 3 items: a cake mix box, a frosting can, and a soda can on the counter near the register. But nothing was taken. Money wasn't taken.
Unsure who left these items on the counter and why, crime scene technicians bagged them as potential evidence. Desperate for leads, detectives double down on their canvass of the neighborhood around the Grand Park Food Market. Through word on the street, detectives learned there may have been a customer in the store at the time of the shooting.
Annette Bryant was 14 years old at the time. She lived in the neighborhood. She had gone up to the store to buy some items for her mother.
Detectives find Annette at her home.
Miss Bryant saw the tall, thin black male with a red shirt outside the store. And when she was inside the store, that same young man entered the store, putting the cake mix, cake frosting, and the soda can on the counter. She was able to tell the police that the young man pulled out a firearm and said something along the lines of, "This is a robbery," or "This is a stick-up." She said that Mr. Farah reached forward to move the gun, potentially protecting her, as the gun was pointing also in her direction. And when he did, the gun fired as the shooter shot the firearm.
Annette is the only eyewitness who sees the shooting. And she even sees the suspect place the cake mix, the frosting can, and the soda can on the counter prior to the shooting.
In the evidence technicians' attempt to lift prints off of the items left behind, they were able to achieve positive prints. They did do a search, and that search was only done on a local level.
This is before you're able to check stuff nationally. And if the suspect hadn't had an arrest record prior to the homicide occurring, he would have never been identified.
The case of the young father murdered in his own market goes ice cold.
Technology has grown immensely over the years, and we've got great equipment to identify suspects. When I looked at the Freddie Farah case, we just had fingerprints, and so we ran the fingerprints again. Ended up getting a report that the latent print from the frosting can and the cake mix box came back to a Johnny Miller.
I was exhilarated. It was amazing to me that here we are 43 years later and we're getting ready to possibly solve a cold case.
I run Johnny Miller in our local databases. Back in 1974, he was a young male, late teens. All right, we got something. But then you also have to think, this could just be anybody who went over and picked up a can and put it back down on the counter prior to the suspect coming in. Our last known address for Johnny Miller is in New Orleans. Then that was a 5-year-old address. What if we went out there and he's not there? He's just this needle in a haystack. But there's only one way. Sergeant Jansen said, you gotta go. We ended up going into one of the precincts in the French Quarter and met up with a uniform officer. Once we showed him the picture, he ended up recognizing Johnny Miller. And he said, I'll look around for him.
Less than an hour later, Detective Radigan gets a phone call. The officer has found Johnny Miller.
He spoke with Mr. Miller just briefly. I told him I was a detective from Jacksonville and I was working an investigation. Johnny agreed to come speak with us.
I never been to this store. You
Never been to that store?
I can remember. Don't put that I said, don't put nothing on me. I never been to that store.
Okay. When I got your fingerprints and you tell me that you were never there, then your denials are just as good as a confession.
Johnny Miller is arrested in New Orleans. The state approaches the Farah family with an idea, a plea deal with Johnny Miller. In exchange for time served, Miller would plead guilty to Freddie's murder and meet with the Farah family to answer their questions.
I did want to see him face to face, and I knew Bobby was going to ask questions, and I did want to hear his answers.
Johnny Miller takes the plea deal and agrees to meet with the Farah family in a restorative justice session.
The main goal of restorative justice is to bring the offender and victim or victim's family together so that the offender is held to account by explaining and apologizing for what he or she has done.
I asked him, was he angry with my dad? Did my dad upset him? He said that he found the gun and he was going to take it into my dad's store to ask my dad what he should do with it. And he said something overcame him when he got into the store and he pulled the gun out of his tool bag. And he said that my dad saw the gun and lunged at the gun to protect the little girl. And when he did, the gun went off. He said he just turned around and ran out of the store.
Mr. Miller kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And then I just told him, we forgive you.
Mrs. Farah just blew me away. Such a strong woman and such a forgiving woman. I was crying. I believe the state attorney was in there crying. We were just so humbled by her.
Freddie was the love of my life. I only lived with him, unfortunately, a very short time. So I don't know what would have happened in our later years.